This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Okay, I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Select Board for April 3rd at 6 o'clock. And if we could please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. All right, well, and we have Finance Committee with us. We don't yet have a quorum, so when you do have a quorum, we'll have you call that meeting to order. Okay, so this is going to be a joint meeting tonight. Is there anybody here for Citizen Speak, formerly called Open Time for the Public, and for anything that's not on the agenda? Okay, seeing nobody, then our first new business, Town Clerk. Lucy, you've got something about the Town Caucus, please?
Lucy Dahl, Town Clerk, 10 Strong Road. I just would like the Select Board to sign off on the warrant for the Town Caucus that was supposed to be last night due to some scheduling errors and some personal things. This was not posted, so it is posted for tomorrow, and the caucus has been changed to next Thursday, April 11th. So if you can sign it for me, that would be great.
What time is the caucus?
7 p.m. to 9 p.m. in this room.
In this room? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and people who are listening, we need at least 25
people to come, to have a quorum.
Have a quorum for the Town Caucus, so please do come. There's some people that have pulled their papers for being on the ballot, so thank you those that have and have turned them in.
Yep.
This is an opportunity. I know we've still got various open slots that people have not pulled papers for, so this is the occasion for people to nominate folks from the floor to be considered at least for the ballot. Whether they accept that nomination or whether they want to accept that nomination is up to them after the caucus. Lucy will be talking to those folks.
Is that the warrant?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We can pass it around. So, yeah, why don't we just do that? I do need...
So I'll make a motion.
Yeah.
Take a motion to authorize the Town Caucus to meet on April 11th at 7
p.m., please.
7 p.m. And that's my motion.
Okay, there's a motion? Yeah, second by Dan. Okay, motion by John, second by Dan. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay.
I also have a second thing, sorry, real quick. The Board of Registrars had met on April 2nd, and we discussed the early in-person voting for the May 21st election, and we discussed opting out of early in-person voting because at the March 5th, 2024 primary, the turnout was extremely low. We had 15 people here that came in. We had a worker here from 9 to 3 on Saturday. We had, I think, 5 people come in. So we do have early mail-in voting, which is fine. And we have over 1,000 applications and ballots that we're going to mail out. But we are asking, the Board of Registrars is asking if we can opt out just for early in-person voting for the annual town election.
Okay.
So,
and it's just for this one town election?
Just for this early election. We're going to be having it for the state primary in September and the presidential in November, but we're asking to not have it for May.
How long is normally the early in-person voting time period? Is it
usually it's 2 weeks.
Really, that long? Yeah, okay. And with that very few number of people that came in last time?
We had 15 people come in.
For the primary? Okay, yeah.
So,
I'm not assuming that the town elections are going to be a barn burner to drawing a lot of people, so this seems to make a little bit of sense in terms of the time and effort.
I can tell you for the town election, we don't have that many papers taken out. We have one paper taken out for finance, one paper taken out for select board. There are, all the seats are open for finance. So, personnel, you know, I mean, there are a lot of seats open, so.
And that's where, as we do this, we have to double check on some of these things. I don't know why we would have had something, normally these should be, I mean, select board is staggered, but I don't know why all the finances, although we've had a couple of appointees rather than elected.
That's why.
And that's partly why they are all expiring at the same time.
yeah.
That wouldn't normally be the case.
Staggering,
So,
yeah.
okay, so we have a request to consider canceling the idea of early in-person voting.
Just in person.
For the May 21 town election only.
Yep.
I'd like to make the motion that we cancel the in-person voting for in-town only voting.
All right.
It's just the
Motion by
in-person.
Dan. Have a second, please?
Second.
Second by Stephen. Okay, any discussion?
Yep. So I'm going to vote against it only because there's a potential debt obligation on the ballot, and I don't want to be seen as trying to sneak a debt in by limiting.
I don't think there's going to,
Well, it
won't be, it can't be
Did I
on
miss?
this particular ballot. There's not enough time, it's got to get through town.
Okay,
Yeah.
well-
Yeah,
so we're going to meet, so, all right, so we're going to vote at town meeting
but it's
to,
got to be 35 days.
It's got to be 35 days.
right, and we were talking about moving the election,
Well-
and somebody was going to find out whether that's even
Yeah.
possible now before the ballots get ordered.
We haven't found that out yet, I don't think. have we?
Unless I missed the
Moving
meeting.
town election, no, we haven't.
You're speaking
So-
ahead. You're speaking ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So no.
so I think it's, I understand that there's a cost associated. I also understand the state usually sends us money for it. I'm just not in favor of limiting access to the polls. And I think some people, even if it's only one citizen that comes down here and does it, I think the new COVID era forward.
Is there a chance
Yeah,
to, make just certain hours? I mean, how much leeway do you have to
That's
set
fine.
the hours or days?
We have to have it during business hours, so 8:30 to 4 every day for 2 weeks.
It is 2 weeks, though. That's a
And then,
requirement.
yep, and then we have to have it during our business hours and then on the weekend, yep. So we have to either have it Saturday and Sunday or for one day for 6 hours. So,
But you will have the mail-in ballots regardless.
absolutely, everyone who ordered a mail-in ballot is going to get a mail-in ballot for the local election.
All right.
So,
Any further thought?
I mean, if we can hold off on this, if there's discussion to change the election, which I was unaware of, then we can hold off on this.
We'll be meeting again on the 9th. So
Okay.
if that's not too late for you to do whatever you need to do for ballots and whatever, it'll be it's
mean,
still
if
right
we're-
before the caucus, so you won't have any new names to put on the ballot. to
No,
send
I
to
won't
print
have any new
anyway, right?
names, yeah.
Okay, well, why don't we, I would just suggest maybe we hold off, that would be an idea.
We can hold off on this for,
If you don't mind, would you?
Yeah, I don't care.
Pull back
until,
your motion?
I pull back my motion.
All right.
okay.
And then that'll give us time. I don't think we've had a time to really
That's fine.
think about the idea. It came up as an idea, but
Okay.
trying to figure out all of our logistics.
Right. And you wouldn't be ordering ballots prior to the caucus anyways, correct?
No, but right after the
Right
caucus
after
is
next,
when,
yeah. So we've still got
because
a
we
day
have
or
to
two.
get them out, and
Yeah, yeah.
if we don't get them out right away,
Right.
they go to
So with us
Hartford,
meeting on the
so-
9th, we'll have a little bit more information perhaps, so we can determine whether that's going to be necessary or not.
Okay.
And then take it from there, okay?
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. So
Yep,
the first
no.
one is good?
All right, thank you.
Signed on the warrant, and that's fine.
All right, thank you.
For the caucus. All right, perfect.
Can I just-
Thank you, Lisa. Yep.
Can I just do one more thing? I'm sorry. I just wanted to show everybody the new
Oh,
bylaw. Ooh. This is a new bylaw manual. I don't know if anybody can see it, whatever. For the general and zoning bylaws. It's not filled yet, but this is what it looks like. I have to put them in there. And the general bylaws are on the town website. They're on my page. If you page all the way down. Oh, no, they're on the government page, sorry. If you page all the way down, go down to general and zoning bylaws. Yeah.
After you're done, I have a question. I don't want to interrupt.
Just page all the way down, click on general and zoning, and they're all there. There is a little link that says login, do not click on it, it's going to go away. But this is the hard copy. It will be in our office. There'll be a copy in Scott's office, and there'll be a copy in the library, so.
So this is the result of finally 3 years of work, pretty
Yeah.
much, of putting
Yeah.
together bylaws and getting this E360 code.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That answers my question. I think I just checked too early, so I'm going to go out and check it out now. And
No, it's there.
later. And
Just go to the town website and hit the
And
government
government,
button and
and I'll
scroll
page all the way down to the
Or even
bottom.
in the search button, just put in bylaws and
Yep.
it will take you right there. So,
Yep.
and you can search by keyword. It's pretty user-friendly, honestly.
Yep.
So I think hopefully people, when you've got questions, you can look at it online, or if not, we do have a couple hard copies as reference.
Yep.
Okay?
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Lucy.
All right,
Appreciate it. All right. Okay, all set? All right, good. Okay, so basically the purpose tonight is our 25 budget discussion. To continue on that, we've had a couple of budget hearings in the past, but we're going to continue on, especially with Hampshire Regional tonight. And I think I'd like to just have that with Tom being here, Tom Cleary, if you'd like to indulge us and be on the front end between that, before we would jump into the big overall budget, just to understand where Hampshire Regional is coming from. That may ease our discussion into the overall.
Do you have specific questions you'd like me to answer, or do you want me to kind of walk you
No, I
through the
think walk us
budget?
through
and
the
what?
budget, because we've got people listening at home and so forth. So, people know that Hampshire Regional's had some issues, but people haven't seen any budget. All the finance people haven't seen the copy of the budget. So
Okay.
our finance team, so hey, Becky, welcome.
I think the business administrator has forwarded the budget to the town of Southampton. I have a few copies here. of the
Before we do
budget.
that, one more thing. We just have a quorum now for the finance committee. If you'd like to call your meeting to order, please.
We'll call our meeting to order at 6:12.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay.
Tom, I know we have electronic copies, but I probably need
Yeah,
2 copies.
not everybody.
And I emailed it to you.
Yeah, and I think we can present them up here. Yeah, you can show them up
The
here.
FICOM,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
So,
So,
no, we've got electronic. We'll just look from this up here too, probably.
as you likely know, there have been a lot of changes at Hampshire Regional and questions about the finances.
Just state your position, I'm sorry.
My name is Tom Clary. I'm the chair of the Hampshire Regional High School School Committee.
Thank you.
And so in terms of town assessments, this is what we're looking for from Southampton, $5,727,471, which represents a 0.65% increase over the prior year, and to Southampton, a 2.23% increase. The goal in creating this budget was to create a budget that wouldn't change what the students were experiencing from their perspective, but realizing the town's concerns. And so in terms of revenue sources, we have state money. There's tuition from Worthington and from the Clark School. There are existing funds, which is what's represented here with reserves. There's grant funding, and then there's the towns, which makes up the bulk of the funding for the schools. The town funding has been drifting down slightly over the past few years, but it's been around 60% of the funding sources. There have been a number of changes which have been going on and have been coming to the surface over the past couple of years. Accounting practices are currently being updated. There are a lot of variations from generally accepted accounting principles that we've been learning about and we're looking to improve upon. We expect that this is going to take several years to get through this process. And so what you see in terms of reports now and what will be happening over the next few years will likely have significant changes. The significance of that is, and there's an instance of that in the numbers here, it can be challenging to compare one year to the next. And there are a lot of unknowns that are being faced by the schools and then as a consequence by the towns at the present time. Reserve funds, or the existing funds that are available to the school, fall into 4 significant categories. The first one is excess and deficiencies, which is somewhat similar to free cash that the towns have available to them. The past practice of the high school has been to keep this close to 5%. In conversations with DESE recently, they're suggesting that at least 2 to 3% is required for the school to operate. Right now, the E&D fund, it hasn't been certified, but it's estimated to be significantly below that 2 to 3%. And so the recommendation from the administration was to not go into the E&D funding. School choice revolving is another area that the school has, and historically, the goal has been to keep that number at about 150% of what the incoming revenue is. And so the budget we have presented keeps us in that range. The next one is something which has historically been called the out-of-district revolving fund. That's a misnomer. There are a lot of different things which are in that, and that's being currently unwound by some consultants and financial professionals who have come into the school. And so we expect that there'll be a lot more information that we learn from that. There are grants and other financial funds within there. And then there's the Transportation Revolving Fund, which is, the current recommendation is to use the entire balance in there.
So just one question, on some of these things that you're talking about, is this, some of the errors or whatever that you're finding are simply things that have been misclassified into wrong categories, you think, or is that?
There are a variety of challenges. Some things have been misclassified, some things have been double entered, some things have not been entered.
But I think it's safe to say that at this point, there's been no evidence that the district is running out of cash or that there's cash missing. If anything, there's a surplus once the grants and all that get unwound, right? Mm-hmm. According to Jay Sullivan.
There are a lot of unknowns, and so committing to whether or not there's a surplus or there's not a surplus is...
No, but at this point, there's a lot of work to be done, but
yes.
there's no document before us, before any committee member that says, hey...
There's no report that I have seen that indicates that there are dire consequences at the forefront.
Question on...
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
On reserves, how much money, you've got them split into 4 categories, but of the total 1 million something, where is the money?
Let's see if...
Or will you get into that when you get into the special pages, or? But we can, just from the high...
we can have the business administrator send the reserve balances to you, so you can see what they are.
I can tell you on the previous slide that he had, going backwards, the transportation one, you have to spend the money this year, and then next year you get reimbursed. In theory, we're supposed to get 100%, but the state never does that. So you want to leave at least one year's worth, because you got to spend it and then it gets reimbursed. The out of district, I think, is supposed to be restricted to if all of a sudden you have somebody move into the district, right, that you didn't have in your budget, and you've got to place them out because they came in with an IEP, that would be the fund.
Out of district is a misnomer. It's not...
So what is the purpose of out of district?
It's inclusive of a number of different funds that are in there, and that's something that has to be unwound, and they're working to understand what's in there and why it's in there and how to appropriately use it going forward.
So for my benefit, to summarize, you're going to use $1 million something of reserves towards this budget coming up. So there must be more than $1 million in there. For those
yes, so there's about, so the school choice revolving has about 1.4 million. And the rationale behind keeping that at 150% is that the numbers for school choice oftentimes aren't published until well into the school year has already started, and there can be wild swings as to where that goes. And even once you get to December, things can change significantly by the time you get to June, at the end of the fiscal year. And so in order to be able to manage that and not go back to the towns, keeping that at 150% has been found to be beneficial.
Can I ask you a question? You mentioned there's a lot of unknowns and uncertainty in these figures. Somewhere do you have like a list of which numbers are known and which ones are unknown, which ones are uncertain, so we know what our confidence level is with this information that's being presented?
So in terms of the fund balances, there are a lot of unknowns that are in there. We don't have fiscal 23 right now, has not been closed. We're in fiscal 24, and we are still waiting to get information in terms of what's been spent to date.
Okay.
The expense lines, in terms of what we anticipate for costs, we believe that those are a reasonable estimate as to what should be asked for. But that is one of the challenges we face in terms of confidence in.
So are you saying overall that this amount of money that you're asking for could increase or decrease?
We believe that this is accurate request to cover the services that are anticipated for the year.
Have you already taken your final vote?
We have taken a final vote, yes.
So the numbers can't go up any higher?
It can't go up any higher. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so we'll come back around on some other questions, maybe on E&D and whatever as you go through, but why don't you go through the...
So there are 12 cost centers that are in the report. School committee costs, the significant increase in this is related to legal costs that went up this year. Central office is where a lot of the attention is being focused right now in terms of positions there and how that's structured. We've broken out the costs related to central office in terms of the temporary lines so that towns can see what we anticipate is the ongoing costs versus what are the fixed costs related to the current challenges. And it's expected that's going to take 2 to 3 years to work through. The administration line, there was a reserve amount of $50,000 put in there this year. The cost for laptops went up significantly, and then there were some new hires who came in at a higher rate on the step lines compared to who they were replacing in there. Staff salaries is currently under negotiations, so we can't really talk about that other than to say that this is our best estimate as to what the costs will be going forward. Athletics, the change there is related to a change in accounting. Things were put into that line which weren't necessarily appropriate to be in there, and so it's transferred out, but it's not a change in overall cost. Buildings and grounds, the school was able to negotiate 31-month fixed rate, and so significantly decrease the cost of electric to the school. And then transportation out of district, I think, is what one person was alluding to in terms of there are significant changes related to educational costs when people are transported out of the district and the school's responsibility for surrounding that. State assessments is primarily focused around school choice out and charter out, and that's pretty much the major changes that we've seen from the budget this year.
Tom, do you know if within this budget that we have, where we have the detail lines, is 100% of the cost of staff and admin in there, or are there partial or whole salaries hidden within school choice accounts as previously done?
Partial or
right, like like if you have a head count of 78 employees, can I get all 78 salaries here, or are some of them funded by the school choice account?
Margaret might be able to speak a little bit more to this.
Hi, Margaret Larson, 9 David, and member of the Hampshire Regional School Committee and the Finance Subcommittee. So historically, the only people who have been funded through grants or school choice have been some of our adjustment counselors. So we're no longer doing that. All of our teachers have always been shown in the budget, and that is the case now going forward. So much as we did with the Southampton school budget, we are making sure that we're showing everything coming in and we're showing everything coming out and not assigning certain roles to certain grants.
Okay.
So do you have the spreadsheets that we got? I mean, that's what, I think we ought to try to walk through those if you have them.
That's what I think.
Yeah, okay. I think let's move into some of the detail unless that'll prompt more questions perhaps. Because not everybody has gotten the actual budget, so
Okay.
that's why we need to be able to project it. Yeah. Can we project it up there? Do we have it? Yeah.
He came from Mickey Buell.
Are you going to drive it? Okay.
Well, actually, forwarded to you.
Yep.
There you go. Thank you.
There we go. Good. Great. Thanks, Scott. Okay. So this is kind of where you started out, so just to recap. Yeah. Go ahead.
So again, there's some folks that haven't sat through this.
Okay.
Yeah,
So in terms of
we're gonna
what I
walk through the
presented,
whole thing,
we
okay?
kind of went through the major cost categories, so school committee, central office administration, and gave you the verbal of
Right.
what those changes were.
But now we want to kind
I
of see
think
the figures. Yeah.
here, like 3 communities are getting a credit. I understand why that's happening, but you might want to just touch on it.
Okay, so we recognize that there's a significant amount of existing funds that we'll be using to cover this budget. And the consequence of that is that there's a lower than historical increase in the budget. The rationale behind that is we have a lot of unknowns. You had a question about the confidence in the numbers. So there is significant concern about that. If the recommendation to the school committee was that if we want to ask for some type of increased funding or have some type of an override, we need 2 things. One is we need confidence in the numbers, and that is a significant challenge for us at the present time. The second thing is that we need strong leadership to help drive that forward. And there's a lot of change going on in the administration right now, and if the budget were to fail in any one of the towns with the change in leadership going on, it would be very challenging to move things forward, and it would significantly affect the ability of the school to operate effectively. And so the recommendation was that we move on a budget which used reserve funds to try to lower the risk to.
And how do you allocate the 10.2 million to each community?
Yeah. I mean, if
So
communities have gone down, is that because of fewer students or?
Okay, so there's a 5-year rolling average calculation that is broken into 2 parts. Each town, based on certain numbers that the state calculates, has a required minimum contribution, and it varies based on the town. Separately from that, there's an over the required contribution. And so that total pot is divided out amongst the 5 towns based on the 5-year rolling average of the students at the school. And so there's been some change in that where Southampton has seen more students, and as this displays, Chesterfield, Goshen have had a decrease in the number of students.
Okay, that's clear. Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Sorry. One of our other considerations is that we know that Goshen has to do an override for their operating expenses. So they have some dramatically increasing costs at the elementary level. They have an out-of-district student who is going to cost each of those towns about $80,000.
Each?
80.
80? Okay.
And they have
Speak up a little louder.
they have to split those between two towns, unlike when we have an out-of-district student at the regional that's split amongst 5 towns. So they have to split that amongst 2 towns. And in addition to some of the other expenses that all the towns are seeing, in terms of insurance costs, ambulance costs, et cetera, we know they have to go to an override. And that is considered a no until it becomes a yes. And their town meeting isn't until, their vote wouldn't be until June 17th. So we also have that as a consideration as we're building our budget to make sure that this is something that the other towns can pass.
Okay, got it. Okay.
And you can proceed with 1 no vote, but not 2 no votes?
That is correct.
Yep. Okay. All right, so that's the overview. So, yeah, go ahead. Yep. So this is our revenue? Yep. Okay.
So these are the revenues, and then expense-wise,
Yeah, can be a little bigger, Scott? Yeah, there we go. Too big.
Sorry.
Very sensitive here somewhere. Even a little bit better if you can. I don't know. There we go. Getting better. Thank you. Yep.
And you're getting revenue from Clark School?
yes, the school has an agreement in all the grades, although it looks like the middle school may be stopping their program, which would likely phase out the Clark program in the long run.
Okay.
So the amount, are we down at the this Chapter 70 money? Is that where we are?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's been a slight increase in chapter money, but nowhere near what we had thought there might be. I guess we'd kind of hoped that there might be bigger chapter money coming in. Yeah.
We're looking for the pot of gold.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, yeah, just again, for people listening that haven't a clue what we're talking about, so try to
Okay, so
pretend nobody knows nothing, okay?
there are various states for sources of funding. There's Chapter 70 aid.
Yep.
There's reimbursement for when students go out to charter schools. There's school choice when students come into the district. And then there's regional transportation aid, which is something which we hope it would be funded at 100%, but historically has not been. There's an agreement that the district has with the town of Worthington to accept their students. It's at an increased rate from what the school choice numbers are, and so that's been found to be beneficial. And then there's a Clark school where there's a program where Clark rents space and provides services in the school.
Southampton's cost per student compared to Worthington's?
A little louder.
How does Southampton's cost per student compare to Worthington's cost per student?
I can answer that.
Thanks.
Okay. So, depending on which measure you're using, it's anywhere between $16,000 to $18,000 for a Hampshire regional student coming from the school. Sorry, I'll speak louder. Worthington at this point pays, well, for fiscal year '25, they will pay approximately $10,700 per student. That will continue to be negotiated. However, Worthington also pays their own transportation and they pay their own sped costs. So their actual cost per student can range from $15,000 per student to $22,000 per student. One year they had an out-of-district or a couple years they had an out-of-district placement, and they have to be the only ones to absorb that. So if it's a $200,000 out-of-district placement, they have to pay for that whole thing. So there have been years where they paid more per student than any of our towns did. However, they do know that the costs are increasing. We will renegotiate that within 2 years. They are also open to us asking for money for capital expenditures as well.
Okay.
Are there any talks about them joining the school district?
I mean, they left a regional school district.
Okay.
So they
They were in
at this
Huntington,
point,
at one point?
yes, at this point, they aren't inclined to. If they see a need to do that, or if we as a district look further into K-12 regionalization, that would be an option. So that's like a 3-year process that we would like to begin, but
Sure.
we don't know where that will end.
It's a good conversation to have.
Yes.
And maybe following on Dan's question, just to inform everybody, just the per student cost, if it exists for the charter school and the school choice in terms of what that, whatever money that is that we get.
Well, school choice is fixed at $5,000 and then adjusted upwards.
That hasn't changed in a number of years.
And adjusted
Decades.
upwards for IEPs or 504s.
Correct.
From the zoning districts.
Yeah, same, charter's similar.
School choice out is at the mercy of whatever school it's going to. And
Right.
last year, they did a 9 or 14% increase, the commissioner did, to the May Institute, to White Oak, or,
Yeah.
whoever,
Correct.
the Naries.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I try to take a high-level view at this, the numbers that would make me feel comfortable is the cost per student against the other towns that have to pay being relatively equal. That's the data I would like to see that shows me that.
So, and
getting
we
a
can
fair
certainly
deal.
give that to you. So with the 5-year rolling average, the cost per town in our district is astonishingly close. It's, 16 to 18,000 per student, depending on the year.
Great.
No matter what town they come from.
Correct. However, so caveat here, that is based on Chesterfield having had 42 students 5 years ago. They now have about 20. So in the next year, not FY25, FY26, that 40 students drops off, and their contribution is going to be smaller. So I don't know how that will impact the per student cost.
In general, across the student body, the cost, depending,
Correct.
their town, which they come from, does not depend, does not drive the cost.
I mean, so much of it
seems to be all
depends
relative.
on the Chapter 70 aid. So our assessments being based on a 5-year rolling average and based on the percentage, if you just look at the additional beyond the minimum contribution, they're equal based on percentage. It's that Chapter 70 money that we do not control that makes the difference.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, good. Anybody else, questions? No? Okay, go ahead, keep on. Sure.
So
back-
these are the same allocations that you saw before in terms of
Yep.
the towns.
So just back onto the, anything on the circuit breaker, rural aid grant, all of that stayed somewhat similar? Rural aid grant has stayed the same? That's fairly new, right, for the last couple of years?
Yes. The grants are something that are receiving a lot of attention in terms of the accounting practices.
Tom, did you already talk about transportation revolving?
We talked about using that funding source, yeah.
So, Reggie, did your question on the excess and deficiency get answered there in terms of what you were talking about? So it looks like we've got there's nothing for
With
25.
this budget proposal, you still have a minimum of 2 existing pots of money to fall back on in the event that you end up coming up short, right? You're not utilizing 100% of all your reserves for school choice.
The school choice revolving fund exists. There are certain limitations as to how that can be used. And there is a small amount, about a little over 1% of funding in the E&D that could be used.
But you're not putting anything in E&D this year?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
So I guess it kind of goes without saying that eventually you're going to have a really big step up because you're using the reserves this year. It won't be available.
The reserves is not, the use of reserves has been stepping up over the past several years, and it's not a sustainable trend to be continued.
Okay. All right. Next page. I guess that was right.
So this is a summary of the 12 different sections that I was talking about before in terms of school committee, central office, administration, staff salaries, and what those changes are primarily representing. If we go down to the next section, you can see more detail into those different changes. So for example, the first one, the lines above go down to the gray line where it says school committee, and
Hold on, Scott.
The line legal is where the bulk of that change is. Same thing, central office is the next one, and so it's broken out into two different lines. The first one is the overall central office and what's anticipated to run the school, and the second line represents the immediate efforts that are being undertaken in terms of fixing the accounting practices that have been shown to be challenging.
So that second line is the one that you anticipate 2 to 3 years out going away?
Will go away, right.
Zero.
And we want the towns to be able to see that this is not just
It's not getting big.
it's not a bigger number. It's something which is specifically targeted.
But your technology support is going up, and that's the laptop issue, or the 22,000?
So the challenge with a number of these different numbers is that looking at one year to the next isn't always a good comparison. But in terms of the explanation for this, yes, the laptop cost going up is the primary one there, as well as the reserve for contingencies line.
And this, on the administration salaries, does that reflect the possibility of a new business manager, or you're outsourcing
No, so
that
the
work now,
business
right?
manager goes up into the central office core costs.
Okay.
And so that encompasses the biggest change there is around the superintendent, where the school has district has felt that it could be beneficial to have a higher salary line in terms of attracting more qualified candidates.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Who controls the reserved contingencies? How does that money spent? Who has the control over that budget? I guess my concern is what I've seen from the previous administration's ability to manage and control spending seems not the best. So why would I trust them with any money, extra money?
When there are changes in line items, they're supposed to come before the school committee for approval as to if
So you
they're
guys have
appropriate.
Okay.
Can I say that? So one of our challenges with central office is that we don't have a documented mechanism for situations where it needs more money or it underspends. So at the moment, when it underspends in central office, any remainder goes into the Hampshire Regional E&D, which isn't appropriate for an entire system. If we go over, then we need to go back to all the towns and ask for additional money. So this is a way to compensate for that, knowing that we have a lot of unknowns this year. And so the $50,000, I don't know that that's the amount that will continue, but because we have this number of unknowns, it seemed prudent to...
Let me say it this way. It could have said $2 in there, and I would ask the same question.
Correct.
Because I want to understand what the mechanism is for that money.
Yes.
The control of that money.
So our All Districts Committee approves additional expenditures, which then goes to the individual school committees, and they also approve that. So there are funding decisions that are approved regularly.
Okay. Anybody? Okay. So, for example, if the 50,000, suppose you had a leaky roof tomorrow, does that 50, are there
No,
limitations
because
on how
that
you
central office is for administrative purposes across the district.
Okay.
If we have a
That's all that is.
building issue,
Okay.
that would be separate. And so we do have a mechanism using E&D or school choice to fund problems like that, which is why we want to form the capital account this year. We're not funding it, but we want to have that so that in the future we have a way to deal with issues like that.
All right. Anybody? Let me know if you've got questions, just holler up. Yep, okay, go ahead. Yep.
So the staff salaries, like I said, that's under negotiation, so we can't get into details about that.
But as you've said, this is, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
And so therefore, you're carrying everyone at a step increase?
We look at step increases, and this is our best estimate as to what we expect.
Yeah, it's not a zero. It's your best estimate given that negotiation.
Correct, and it also includes existing step increases.
Yeah.
So that is always, we know what our baseline is for the next 3 years, which includes already contracted step increases.
Thank you. It's just worth saying again.
And so the negotiations are ongoing, and do you expect to have them concluded before
So
school
we
year,
are
or?
currently in mediation, and that's where we are right now. We're meeting again next week, and hope springs eternal.
All right. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Substitute. Mine is, doesn't take more to get substitutes.
There have been some changes in terms of how substitutes have been used in the past year, and yes, there was the school committee approved an increase in the substitute day rate in an effort to attract more subs to manage the challenges.
We also have 2 permanent building substitutes who are on staff, and so they're there every day. With 80-some teachers, it is not uncommon every day to have teachers out, and so having the building substitutes means that we don't need to worry as much about that. But every school in our district, as well as in the region, has a difficult time attracting substitutes, so we have consistently had to raise that a little bit every day.
The athletics, the integrated sports, that was one of the areas where I was talking about. There's a change in accounting in there, so that line actually hasn't changed significantly in terms of the costs for the district. This here, you can see that the biggest change here is related to electric, which was the fixed contract that I talked about before, that the administration was able to negotiate.
Anybody?
Transportation is basically the buses and out-of-district vans to send students to various programs.
How long is your bus contract? Is that due up anytime soon, or is that?
It's a 5-year contract?
We're in the third,
5-year, and we're in the third.
We have 3 or 2 years left.
it's a 3-year contract with 2 1-year renewals built into it.
Yes, so we
Okay.
can get 5 years.
So you're halfway through it or something like that?
We're in the third, yeah.
Out-of-district tuition is, what we talked about, students going to other programs when they can't be served by Hampshire Regional. Staff benefits, we saw a significant increase in insurance costs this year. And then the state assessments is related to school choice out as well as charter tuition out. And as you can see, this illustrates the benefit of having the reserve fund for school choice at 150%. There's a big swing here in terms of that expense, and it can go either way.
Going back to programs out of district, there's a huge increase 2 years ago or a year ago.
Yes.
Is it always just a function of who the students might be?
Yes, it's.
Yeah, so what we often see is that the elementary schools are taking, a hit in terms of numbers, and then that comes to the high school. And so some of our new programming related to adjustment counseling and Tier 2 interventions have enabled us to keep some students that we ordinarily might not have been able to keep. So that is always top of mind for our administration, is how do we keep these students in district, because the cost can be exorbitant, but it is not always possible.
So like Norris is going down this year because we have a 6th grader that's going to 7th grade.
Yeah.
They're going to pick up, Hampshire Regional will pick up the cost.
Correct.
Not only for that, but because it's an IEP, that student will stay past 12th grade, right, into 13th and 14th. It's like 22. There's an
I think they
age.
go to 21 or 22.
Yeah.
Yes.
So some you can anticipate because they're already at Norris.
Right, so-
Others move in this,
So next,
in the district.
right, next year's budget, we're going to benefit from it, but they're going to take the hit if they don't have people aging out
Right.
on the flip side.
Thank you.
I think that's the last.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have comments, questions? Yeah, Scott. I mean, Scott, Bradley, you guys are the numbers guys. Go for it.
Somewhat related, but the request for the capital project stabilization fund to be put on the warrant, maybe we can just talk about that a little bit.
So the school, well, actually, Margaret, maybe this is probably,
Oh,
you're most involved in this. So.
So this has been something that probably should have been done 10 years ago or so. In particular, we know we have a capital plan, and historically, we've been able to fund most of those items from our operating budget or rural aid. So this year in particular, we are repairing the gym floor. There's some repairs to our auditorium, the theater stage that we're able to use rural aid for. The exception to that over the past 10 years was when we needed the new HVAC system. And so we did come back to the towns and ask for something. What we would like to do is have a capital fund that annually we put a certain percentage to be determined from school choice or other revolving funds, and that goes into our capital fund so that we can be more self-sustaining in that area. We have some very large capital projects coming up, so that will not cover all of that, but if we can be more mindful in advance of our future needs, including our field floods, and we need to do a feasibility study on that, and that could be $1.5 million. We honestly don't know between that and repairing our tracks. So there's probably going to be a combination of some bond issues and coming to the towns and using some of our reserves, but that is a place to start, and we really feel we need that place to start, and so we are hoping that gets to come to town meeting and that is approved.
Does the language, I read it, but I forget now, does the language put a cap?
It does not.
And would Hampshire Regional be opposed to us amending it on the floor?
No.
Here. A percentage of, it should never exceed a percentage of whatever the operating budget is.
Right. I think probably different towns have different ideas about how that should be managed. There are some towns who have their own capital fund that they expect to go to the school if they want, and they would like to control those funds. So we still need to work through some of those issues with each town and how they are currently navigating their own capital expenses as well as future capital expenses for the schools.
I like the idea of empowering the school board to have the authority of with that money. I think that's a good checks and balances over the school administration, like we talked about with the other fund.
Yes.
To that point, you talked about some of the capital building improvements. That seems to be an area that if there was an ask of where we would spend other money, that's where that would go. That's the one part we don't see when we look at budgets. We don't see what isn't in the budget. What would have been there if we had more money? Is it capital?
It's capital.
It's all capital building
it's capital.
Improvements.
And also I think it is one of the most challenging parts of being in a decentralized regional school, because we have to be aware of every town's ability to pay.
Yep.
And so in a certain year, might like a slightly larger budget, in order to accommodate some of the needs that we have that are either long-term or short-term? Yes. But we always have to be aware of what our towns are able and willing to do with us.
So if it is capital related, then building up that buffer of the capital
Yes.
fund may allow for towns to account for that over periods of time to contribute.
Yes, and we know that it can often be more palatable if it's a longer-term bond issue or debt exclusion or something as opposed to put into the annual operating budget. And so we are sensitive to that as well.
So just to be clear, Margaret, you mentioned this, the reserve for contingencies, the 50,000 that's being asked for.
That's in central office,
That's a
though.
central office thing.
Correct.
So, but having that kind of reserve fund just for labeling the same
I think
kind of
it's
thing.
listed,
Is that the same?
it's listed.
Oh, is it
under
listed?
Administration.
Oh, it's
Oh, it's
administration.
administration, I'm
Okay.
sorry. Yeah, it's
I thought there was
administration.
one for central. Did that get?
That's the 70,000,
Did that go away?
the one.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
different. Yes.
Okay. But anyway, so that's a reserve fund for those kinds of contingencies. But you're saying that right now you have nothing for like a capital reserve fund as
So
a specific line item?
traditionally, we have said that our school choice revolving fund, which we are trying not to dip into too much every year. So we use all of the incoming school choice, but we try to be very judicious in how we use our school choice revolving. And that has always been our source for potential capital needs. Now, working so closely with DESE over the last couple months, it has become very clear to us that doing so actually changes the budget, and so we need to come back to the towns to ask for permission to use additional monies. If it is not something that changes your assessment or changes the amount you are contributing, then it is considered passive approval. So you can not bring it to the towns. The select board can say, we're going to take no action on this. This is fine with us. If, in fact, we had an emergency, like the HVAC system, which fortunately coincided with the budget season a couple years ago. But if it didn't, then that would mean that we would have to return to the towns, and then that would have to go to a special town meeting in order to approve that additional expenditure. So we are trying to avoid those type of situations. So working with the amount of money that we have and being more thoughtful about what we see happening in the next 5 years or so. We've had a capital plan for a long time, but we haven't had huge expenditures like we were expecting for the field and replacement of our track, which we have to do every 10 years.
And a lot of this started a year ago, when whatever happened with the E&D certification for the number to be what it is.
Right.
Because the other piece, and Tom mentioned it, but only mentioned the number of the 5%. If E&D comes back at 7%, anything north of 5%, that delta needs to go back to the communities under statute, which is what happened last year. So then that started the conversation about the future plans and what they need and can they create this. So instead of, at least I know from the body that was here at this time, there was a lot of pushback of, you can't just take the money and put it in there. So, I think they're taking the logical approach. Let's see if we can get the policy passed first, then we'll figure out the funding. But under our agreement, through when Southampton joined, there's nothing that prevents the school committee, Hampshire Regional School Committee, from putting forward a capital request project for all the towns to vote on debt overrides and/or pay from some other source they want. I think they're just trying to get the policy in place.
Yeah, so
and
this sounds
then
like
start
more
funding.
intentional, long-term
Kind of like our operational
planning,
stabilization.
That's what we're hoping, yes.
a little bit more of that, yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, how about anybody, yeah, great.
A general question, do you budget like a balance sheet or statement of condition as part of this for us to see, so we know I'm kind of back to my question about the reserve funds. I don't know what's in them. I don't know how, I know the total they're going to be used, but I don't know what's going to be left at the end of the day.
We can get you a sheet that
Yes.
shows what those balances are.
Yeah, so I think Tom said that you'd already talked about the transportation revolving and the fact that we're using all of that this year. That is a fund that is supposed to be used up every year. So that historically has not happened. School choice is something that can go over multiple years. Circuit breaker has to be used over 2 years. So we are, there's still some of our revolving accounts that need a little bit more investigation, but we are happy to give you what we have in our balances. School choice, we have about 1.4.
A little over 1.4.
Little boy, 1.4. And so we feel that we needed to use that transportation revolving in order to be compliant with MGL, but going forward, we would be more judicious with that.
Isn't there an issue with the books being closed too?
Yeah.
Is that-
Yes.
And those books include, the works, it's kind of current balance sheet and revenues for the year that it's being closed.
Yeah, FY23 is imminently closing?
We hope.
We hope, yes. So, and that is partially the reason why we didn't use E&D this year, because we weren't confident in that number, and we want to be confident before we come to you.
And part of closing those books means squaring away the outstanding
grants.
grant questions that are holding up Bradley's books.
Yes, which is a
That's holding
doozy.
up our books too, which is our
Correct.
challenge. And we, even though you all got the extension from DESI, we ended up getting
know.
one from DLS too, but we really had no intention of going until the 99th
No.
hour
Right.
at midnight to do that. So, given that Southampton is the largest contributor to the budget, I would hope that there would be some priority given to getting our books,
Yes.
figures, challenges that Bradley has talked about with Mickey or whomever
Both
else.
of our regional schools have, yes.
Getting those
Yes.
out of the way, because we really need to close this budget
Yeah.
sooner rather than later. I mean, I don't want to be here on, April 29th saying, okay.
No, I think all hands are on deck
Yeah.
for that right now.
There's a lot of effort.
Okay. No, hope so. We need to do that. Just one quickie. I just was noticing, you mentioned circuit breaker briefly. Why is the circuit breaker request down quite a bit from, going from 24 at 400,000 down to 255?
right, let's
What's
see.
influencing that?
Let's see.
That's on the revenue source?
The definition of circuit breaker is to make up the difference of an unexpected special education cost. So you have to have the cost, and it has to be 125% greater than your budget.
Okay.
Then you can apply for a circuit breaker, and you'll get you won't get 100% of that money back, but you'll get that money back from, so if you don't have the needs.
Okay.
So last year,
So it's fewer kids needing,
so part of the reason that we made some decisions last year in terms of using, additional E&D is that we knew that our budgeted expenses for FY24 were fairly extraordinary. And so we expect to get more back in circuit breaker this year that has not been certified. And so we chose to be fairly conservative in how we use that. It's the same E&D, transportation revolving. There's there's a few questions, and so we decided to use for transportation reimbursement what we got this year. It could very well be more, but we don't know that. And so we're trying to take as conservative approach as we can.
And again, transportation is supposed to use it the next year.
You are.
And circuit breaker, you can allocate over 2 years.
Yep.
carry it out, yeah.
Yeah, 2 years for circuit breaker.
Right, okay. Good, okay. Anybody else? Other questions, thoughts? All right, good.
I think it's a good budget based on everything that's going up.
Yeah,
at
I mean, honestly,
Central.
having been to the preliminary hearing, this is a bit of a relief, I would say.
And I would, well, yes, yeah, that's Tom. Start you off with a 17% increase.
I was like, 17%?
Yeah,
What?
but
You're all like, woo!
There's a lot of effort being put into a lot of people to help drive this forward.
I'm sure.
and
Yeah,
Be
no.
very thankful to Margaret for everything.
Yeah, well, thanks for.
And Chris,
thanks for your
on that end, with the caucus coming up, I believe there are 3 open seats on Hampshire Regional
Yeah.
from Southampton. So anybody wants to really dig into this next year,
Yeah.
let us know. We'll write your name in on the ballot.
Yeah, exactly. We need some people on the Hampshire Regional School Committee for sure. So, no, thanks. And thanks to everybody in the teams and various people that have been involved in the Finance Committee and everybody else that's been involved in at least getting it to this far. So,
And if, as you ponder this, if you come up with more questions,
yeah, no, we might
just
as
let
we
us know, and
pull everything
we'll
together.
do our best
Yeah.
to
But I think if you
answer
can get
this.
around, the sheets that Reggie was talking about, send them on to Scott and we'll get them distributed. That would be fine.
Coming off the board.
So, good. All right.
She's on the north
Oh,
side.
nothing else?
Tom has been excellent steward of our board this year.
Very good.
Pleased to have him.
Good. All right. Well, thanks. Much appreciated.
Business office.
Okay. Thank you much. And so I guess open to Scott and Bradley to give us the big overview of where things stand in terms of the big picture now with, I assume you've built this figure into the budget already, so that was great just to have a bit of clarity in terms of how they look at things, and I think that helps us understand it a bit better. So give us the overview, whatever you got there, Scott. Okay. And this is maybe different than the ones that Bradley sent around yesterday, right? You guys have worked on it today.
It should be pretty much the same.
Pretty much the same, okay. Okay.
Yep. So this is the...
Anyway, let me know. Okay.
So currently, we're at $21,231,000 with the budget one request from all the departments. And there was a few placeholders that we had to put in just because we didn't receive the information, but it was minor things, a few $100s here or there. So nothing that was really extraordinary. The updated projected revenues are a little over $21 million right now. We've been obviously watching what the state's doing. We've been checking cherry sheets. As you know, yesterday the governor announced that the state will be having a hiring freeze. Yeah. So is there an expectation of much more? Probably not at this point. So it does leave a difference of $230,000 between the revenues and the budget one requests. Many of our budgets this year were submitted as budget one, so there wasn't really a lot of wish list items on budget number two. A few here and there, but most of it was really consistent, and there really wasn't a lot of quote wish list items. The revenues have been updated. We're constantly checking that. We had a good meeting with Brett last week for the water superintendent, for the water department indirect costs, to going over that. It's been a few years since that's been updated. We don't expect, there might be some changes, but it probably won't be a drastic change. The Collins Center draft was expected today, but I have not gotten anything as of right now.
Surprise, surprise. That's $75,000 we spent not to get a report in 18 months.
75,000?
No, 35.
Yeah.
They got 35,000.
Still even, okay.
It wasn't that bad.
Southampton, South Hadley will probably have theirs before we have ours, and they just started 2 months ago.
Well, we were told it went to the overall supervisor to sign off on or something. That's what we were told? The Collins?
Oh, yes. So the draft went to the supervisor today, who was in professional development. That's what the email I got.
I could suggest some courses.
I could do it quick. I could do it in a few hours if you want me to.
I know.
Don't disagree, but in all fairness, too, I don't know that we know exactly when everything went to Collins, too. I mean, there's delays all over the place, but yes, there's
Yeah, I know.
slowness there, but I think there was some slowness on our side as well. But anyway, go ahead.
And then the FY22 audits, they should have everything. The last bit was from the school lunch program, which they should have received all the information on Monday. And I double checked yesterday, and there might have been one or two things, but hopefully by tomorrow, all that should be squared away. Okay. Knock on wood.
That would get that. Mm-hmm.
Just to put in perspective, so we're looking at about $22.2 million for our draft budget this year. Our expected costs, and things that, are pretty stable, like insurance and benefits. At this point, we're not going to be going out to bid for our insurances right now. I think it's a little bit too late. Our benefits, the same thing as well. If we're going to do any plan design changes, I mean, that it's right now past that, so they're pretty much all set. The wages, education and core services, our library, council on aging, highway department, police and fire. There's not a lot of additional departments that Southampton has. We don't have a sustainability director, and we don't have, a sewer department or things like that, like other municipalities. So really everything that we have is really a core service for the citizens. The debt is obviously, again, it's a little bit too late to think about refinancing everything, but we did have a pretty steep drop in the debt this year. I have to get the number, but a lot of the stuff did come off. And then we have a lot of contractual obligations, everything from, the HVAC to the copiers to transfer station stuff, all of that. So, those are really expected costs that are a little bit more difficult to find money from. The other costs, which is in the red, things like, maintenance, I don't like to defer maintenance or things like that, overtime, other expenses, copier paper, things like that. Those total just a little bit under $3 million. And then our current stabilization funds are as shown.
Yeah.
So let me just...
With the expenses in there, are they all just showing budget 1? And so where we made the changes on budget 2 for certain, like specifically I'm thinking the Board of Health, right? We're going to take out the costs associated with the contracted services, put that in revolving. So that would put what, 46 or 60,000?
We would probably still need to seed that a little bit, so to make sure there's enough money to
Oh, yeah,
To get it
but,
started.
right. No, we right now it's still in technically, the 42,000.
so it's all budget 1 through the whole workbook, okay.
Yeah. So in this, I sent this around as well. So the green,
Sorry, before you go there, back on the various stabilization funds, so that previous, so this is what we have, or this is what we want to do when we get free cash?
No.
this is what we have, Bradley?
What we have right now?
With fiscal year 23's ending balances and the current activity in fiscal year 24, that's those current balances.
Okay.
As of, well, the revenues haven't been updated since December 31st, updating
Yep.
January soon, but
And that,
there's some interest that flow into some of these accounts
Yep,
every few months.
okay.
But,
So we have 95,000 in capital now without doing any new stuff?
right.
Okay, that's more than I thought.
And we, operating is understated by the 356 that we borrowed,
yes,
that we need to put back in.
56 back into operating.
Yep.
Capital is really low to me.
Okay,
We should do
yeah,
something about that.
yeah. and this-
OPEB's not really a stabilization.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. It's a percentage we're supposed to put in from free cash, right?
No, it's right, no, I wouldn't call it a stabilization, but I mean, it falls in the, it's outside the general fund, right?
Right, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, and just, everybody, just be sure you're speaking up loudly enough so we can hear everybody. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Scott, sorry.
So just going through the budget really quickly, there's not a lot of excess to it to begin with, but right here, and I sent this around a little bit earlier, so I just put in green things that would fall under the traditional wages, contractual agreements, things like that. Yellow is things that we might, possibly take a look at, and red is some items that I think may be underfunded for the budget this year. One of the things I did also is put just some percentages, so you can see that in the this column right here, which just shows it's a comparison of the amended budget to the FY25 budget. If it's above 100%, then that's an increase. If it's below 100%, that's a decrease. So that's just to show everyone. One of the first things I think are underfunded is legal expenses this year. We have a lot of transactions going on, potential for another town meeting. I think with the city clerk and a lot of properties in the Board of Health that they're looking at, that's one of the, I guess, the danger areas for underfunding. There's a few areas that we are kind of looking at to make sure that are a little bit out of the ordinary, past 100%. Like the assessor software report is 116%, but that was because of an increased cost for vision. Bradley's actually checking the independent audit number.
I reached out and they gave me that number, but that's for the fiscal year 23, wait, not 20. We're currently auditing 22, and there's a lot done when they were supposed to go on to 23. I thought the plan was they were going to do 22, and then 23 was going to be like January of this year. And that was a $47,000 number, but they haven't started that yet. So I'm not sure when they're going to start fiscal year 23. So that's the amount that we have to pay for the fiscal year 23 audit. But for the fiscal year 24 audit, I don't know, have that number.
But,
Usually we budget for the next year.
The next year,
and come with
yeah.
that amount.
yeah, okay.
And remind me, we signed a contract for just 1 year or 3 years? Did we go back?
Thought we did the 3 years,
Did we do a 3-year?
subject to town approval. we didn't have enough money to do it, right? So
Yeah.
we put the caveat, subject to town approval.
Yeah, we might just have to go back and just double check on that contract, but I would think you'd have to, if that's really for 23 audit, and they haven't dug down onto it yet, it seems like we need to be looking to put something in there for 24 at the same time. So that's a definite bright red line, I think. And I think too, legal, I mean, I think we've kept it at about 25,000 year after year after year, and, you know, we've managed to either not do some things or, you know, do some, you know, do it as minimally as we can. I think we've been very judicious about how often we've had to contact the
Well, I think it also
the
depends
legal
on
folks.
why.
We've had a
why
lot of
we're-
unusual expenses in the last few
Yeah,
months.
but like, I don't think that line item should be hit for anything related to legal work related to the public safety building or the council on aging. Like, those are project costs that should be within those buckets. That,
Yeah, no, I think if we can find those kinds of, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think like a lot of things that are happening now with the Board of Health and certain properties that are, you know, they're having issues with and so forth, we've had to go back and forth with a fair amount. Some of that too, though, may get absorbed by whatever settlement happens or the auction of a property or whatever. It may all come out, but just to say that we've had more unusual expenses and many more of them this year, I think, than we've had in the last couple of years, so.
I look at it this way too. We do have Scott who has. I look at it this way too, that we do now have Scott who has a law degree. So although he's not going to represent us in the court of law, he does have that background. So I think that will provide a level of support in that area that we haven't had before.
Yeah, no, and I think, you know, we'll continue to be judicious in terms of when we need to consult KP, but thank you, John.
thanks.
I think it's like insurance.
Yeah.
You hate to pay the bill, but you need
You
to
need it when you need
pay
it.
the bill.
Yeah, you need it when you need it, so.
You avoid a greater expense.
Yeah. So that may be something, you know, as we, you know, if we can find a few extra dollars to top that up to 30, wouldn't be a bad idea, frankly, but
Here, here.
something like that. So,
I guess overall, what's the goal? I mean, I looked at the cover sheet. The big story says we're within.
we got to balance, we have to
Pretty
present a
darn
balanced budget to the
close.
town in less than, you know, to the warrant in a couple of weeks, so that's the challenge. So anything in yellow is something that we've got, from what you're saying, Scott, the way I'm hearing it, is a little bit of wiggle room to look at.
Not a lot, but
Yeah.
that's if you want to maintain, you know, without talking about wages,
Right.
other things like that.
Yeah.
So here's what I would, the process I would go about is, with anything you have highlighted in yellow, if you can put a priority number associated with them as to how you would go about cutting them, then we'll start with that.
Yeah.
So if you can put, I don't care if it's high, medium, low, or put them in order, which way you want to cut them.
Yeah, well, and I think too, just to say, there may be a couple things, I don't know, on this list, but from time to time, I don't know, I'm just thinking of the MS4 stormwater thing, or the mosquito control program, or whatever. At some point in time, we've managed to pull them aside from the general budget and fund them somehow else, whether it's, we've used ARPA a couple times for a one-time expense, or, you know, we're a little low on doing too much there, but anyway, just to say, if there's anything like that that would lend itself to not being in there, that could be kind of a separate, find a separate funding source, that might be one way to look at it too, but,
So
yeah,
That's
Brad.
the third column.
Brad,
So
yeah,
there's-
go ahead, Scott, yeah.
Notice that the Conservation Commission expenses is the same as the election registration expenses. That's a mistake on my end. It should be 6,000 for the Conservation Commission expenses.
So my question was, if you add up all the yellow lines, does it cross off enough money to balance our budget? No.
Probably not.
It's not that easy,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
I mean, like, for example, like the Conservation Commission wages, there's still about a little under $16,000 in ARPA money that we can use this year, so that's, you know, that's a little bit here or there.
Okay,
The
so we
planning-
might not need all that 25.
Right. Like the planning board, they can usually cover that $5,000 in their revolving funds. They, you know, their rationale was they wanted it just, you know, just in case. But, you know, it's something that we can discuss with the planning board to maybe make a little bit less.
Before you get off of that, the top one on the cyclical assessor, go up a little bit. That's something that's required, no? Is that a fixed figure, the 5,700? Is that? We must be coming up on the cyclical. There's annual, but we may be up for, I forget now if is it a 3 or is it a 5 year now? Didn't they change it to a 5 year valuations?
I thought we put an even amount in every year.
Yeah, but I think, I'm not sure. We'd have to check that maybe with the assessors on that one.
Yep.
But, yeah.
It was 7250 a couple of years
Yeah.
ago. And then
But I can't remember if it's a 3 year or a 5 year cost differential there.
You're saying cyclical inspections equals 5-year revaluation expense? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's what the assessors mean.
Well, I don't know where the 5,700 comes from, except that if that's bigger, is that because it's time now to do more evaluations because it's that time to do 3 year or 5 year evaluations? I don't know what that refers to. That was my question. I don't know in the budget narrative, which, if you would check that, because hopefully they put something in their budget narrative that would help us understand that. I'm just wondering if there's really that much to play with in there in terms of wiggle room. There may not be. So, here we go. Thank you. Anything there? Not much. No. Okay, so I think that's a question, just, how did that change on that particular one?
Yeah, it's just something that sticks out to it's 250%. So even though it's a smaller number,
Right,
if it goes from
right.
$250 to $500, it's
Yeah.
200%, but still, it's
Yeah.
something that we want to look at.
Yeah, please do follow up on that. My suspicion, being the liaison to the Board of Assessors, is that that reflects the intention to go out and record more new growth and get that onto the permanent tax rolls.
Okay.
And that would be periodic, checking to see that, there are things beyond building permits that need to be added to the valuation.
Yeah. And that may or may not be a contract expense or a current assessor, or?
It has recently been managed by a contractor, and so it's not a salary expense.
Yeah, okay.
I kind of look at this as a pretty easy exercise.
Dan, you can't lean back with that. I'm sorry.
Try to talk to you guys. All right, so if you take out the salaries, everything remaining, if you take an even haircut on all those items, that seems like an easy way to arrive at the budget we need. It's 1%, but it's going to be less than 1% once, you get down to it. So I think that's a pretty easy way, and we shouldn't be having to spend too much time on this item with that approach.
Yeah. But I think we need to understand where some of the things are anomalies compared to what we've sent before. So, something that's a big, small amount of dollars, but it's a big percentage increase, so what's the rationale behind some of that? So,
yeah, but I guess I would look to our accountant to identify any anomalies in our budget.
yeah, well, that's what we're doing tonight.
Isn't that the accountant's job, right?
I wouldn't be cutting any of the utility costs
Yeah.
because those are always going up, and people always struggle at the end of the year to pay those final bills.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, go ahead, Scott. Continue.
So going down, like Bradley just mentioned, some of the building maintenance stuff, our built town hall building expenses is going to be really tight this year, and things are breaking on a regular basis. I know the heat in the Council on Aging is now acting up. So that's one of those levels I do think might be a little underfunded. And then gas and electric just being carried over from last year, being level funded is always a little bit cautious for me. Technology services, that reflects the new service agreement that we have with Novus. So it's essentially an IT department that they do on a regular basis. Most of it's remote, but we do have in-person support every second Thursday, and that's been really helpful, even though we just entered into that a few weeks ago. One of the things that I will be putting in the annual town meeting is, for this year, is just a transfer of about $15,000 to do the Wi-Fi, which is actually part of what Novus recommends in their contract to get it up to speed. So everything would be redone. it would solve the Wi-Fi and the Council on Aging, and it would make a secure.
Make a secure Wi-Fi for the town hall, which we do not have right now.
So if I ask this question, if you cross out the salaries and cross out the expenses that are fixed, what is remaining that is variable that we can change or hasn't been set by a committee or a town department? So if a town department's come in and said, I want to be level funded, and it's in there, that's their prerogative. So what do we have to work with here?
At 2.9.
Okay, so which items are those?
Usually, it's a lot of them. It's the majority.
I mean,
of,
if that's
like,
what we're
smaller ones.
if we're gonna solve this, right? I don't want to wait until the end of the month.
That we solve it all, but this is the first discussion where
To solve it.
how far apart we are. Yeah.
Let's just get those items. Those are the ones we can adjust, right?
If we can, yeah. I mean, there's still some negotiations.
Those are the ones we can adjust,
Yeah,
right?
if we can.
So we have to know what the list is of what can be adjusted, and then we'll look at those. So it's simple.
Yep.
Public safety is another one. There's obviously some contractual bargained increases. The Quinn bill is pretty, if the wages go up, then the Quinn bill is going to go up as well along with that. Same thing with overtime. So if there's a more expensive base rate, then every hour of overtime is going to cost more money. One of the things, we can look at is, building expenses for the police station. Obviously, we don't want to put too much money in, but even the best case scenario, if everything goes smoothly, we're still probably about 3 to 4 years away in the best scenario to get a new place for our fire department or police department. One of the things I did put in was the communication expenses, and I did offset that as revenue by the grant, and that's one of the cautions that we have is because that's going to be reduced year after year until we don't get a subsidy anymore. So next year, I think it's 50% or 75%.
No, we're 3 years where the grant would pay 100%. Then the fourth year, so this is our dispatch that's now managed by Easthampton. The fourth year, I believe we have to pay they pay 50%, then 25%, and then year 6, we have to pay the full amount of the dispatch. So this is essentially setting up a quote-unquote reserve line, anticipating that we'll have at least something built up, so when we're ready and have to pay it ourselves, rather than getting it through this grant currently, that will be something that's there. So that was what we had talked about at the last meeting. So the 175, is it? Yeah, right.
So from this spreadsheet, is there an identifier that we can use to filter on which items we have the ability to be changed?
Well, any item can be changed. It's a matter of prioritizing.
So based on the method of we want to avoid affecting salaries. We're pretty close within 1%. We've identified in your original pie chart that there are expenses that are variable. So we get rid of the cross out the fixed expenses. Can you produce that for us for next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You should be able to, right, Bradley? Yeah.
Okay.
Public safety with fire is still relatively level funded.
Does that include the new hire, so the being the wages, so the new hires that we don't have yet, the new paramedics that we don't have yet? Okay.
And all the wages do include any vacant positions, right, Bradley?
Yeah, okay. Right.
Education, which we just talked about, Norris and the Hampshire Regional. Public Works is going to be a little bit of a question mark going into the budget, going into next year. There are some salaries, there's some negotiations that we have to do both with the superintendent and the union. So that's not built into that, but that's something that once we sit down and get a better idea, hopefully we can get a contract settled for at least maybe next special town meeting to maybe just add it on for the funding for that, or to transfer or figure that out. I don't expect it to be a huge cost. There's only 4 employees currently employed. It could go up to 8. But something to keep aware of. And then yellow, I have to talk to Randall, is it possible to shave a little bit off of the road machinery expenses, which I'm a little bit wary of, because when you look at our MS4 stormwater management, the reason for the increase is because we have to hire out a street sweeper, because our street sweeper is not functioning right now.
Right.
So it's balancing today versus tomorrow. So I'm always a little bit cautious on that. And then cemetery expenses, they did provide a justification for the increases for like a lot of the projects, things like plot software, which I don't know much about, so don't ask me anything on that. And then, tree maintenance and things like that. So
It's tiny.
getting into the Board of Health, so we did talk about doing the revolving fund for that. I did talk to the director, and she's going to be able to take out the additional hours, or I guess the changes to salary out of the septic improvement fund.
Yeah.
So she committed to that, so that should lessen it by about $5,000. I haven't talked to the Council on Aging director, but I know that the Council on Aging really wants to fully fund the director's salary out of the general schedule or general budget. I'm not sure if that's possible, so I know last year it was helped by about $2,000 to $3,000. So that's one area just off the bat. And, veterans agent expenses, I really would not want to cut that. $700 to $1,100, it's $400, and it's just an increase. I wanted to just show the increase, but, I think Michelle's doing a really great job, and a lot of positive feedback on her. And she's doing things, just basic office supplies and things like that. You can actually see it upstairs right now. So it's a real positive, positive change. Culture and recreation, as Johanna had mentioned, a lot of this is, minimum funding to maintain the library grants. There isn't a lot of changes to it. The biggest driver is obviously the books and materials for the library. And then employee benefits. This is something I need to dive into a little bit more next year. I'm just a little bit, in the eighth inning right now to talk about any changes or anything like that. So essentially, we're just continuing with what we have now and going into next year. So most of our insurance is done through Maya or the Hampshire Trust, and those are kind of set for us.
So I have a question. I just don't know how this works, but the town has a huge pension obligation and other expenses as well. Is that done kind of regionally through this Hampshire County something?
Yeah.
Hampshire County retirement.
So they tell us, so the idea is that eventually we catch up and we fully fund those, or is that the way it's supposed to work?
Eventually. We have to set a minimum amount each year to it. Hampshire County, the regional trust manages the funds for us. They do all the paperwork. They're like a third-party administrator.
But they're not giving, do we have an obligation to fund a certain amount every year? And who sets that?
You're talking about retirement, not insurance, correct?
Yes.
I'm talking about retirement.
Retirement.
That's different than the group insurance trust does the health insurance. The retirement system is the Hampshire County retirement system, and they have an actuarial calculation done every year. I can send you, I was just going to look it up, the last report with all the towns that participate.
They basically tell us what.
They did something fixed.
I think some of that is set, through them. Yeah.
And it's based on the salaries that are paid, it's based on the number of the retirees, and what they're paying, there's like all kinds of things that go into that.
So is the goal to get rid of the liability over time, or is the liability just, so it's always going to be there?
Yeah.
So it's not fully funded?
No. It's the same as the state system, it's just that the state has different retirement, so Hampden County has their own and Hampshire County has their own. But it's everything's calculated the same as if you were a state employee.
But in theory, it's a huge obligation that we don't have the funds for.
Yeah. No, it's a big chunk.
Wages and health insurance for retirees too, so that's another thing to remember.
Yep.
For debt service, obviously there's not much flexibility on this unless we try to restructure our debt, which is going to take a while, but so a lot of the items, the dump truck, these items right here came off of the debt this year. So,
I would assume the rate on those obligations is as low as it's going to be for a while. If you refinanced anything.
yep, as it goes down,
Yeah.
other stuff will be coming up.
I'm sorry. The rate decreases or the payment is a decreasing payment schedule?
Well, as more debt comes off, we're able to add more on. We don't have to add on, but with a lot of the capital expenditures, the buildings, police vehicles, DPW equipment, we're going to see that coming back on quickly.
Our bonding capacity will increase as old debt is retired.
Yeah.
Is the rate on that new stuff today quite a bit higher than what it might have been 2 years ago or 3 years ago?
In general, yes, but I don't want to speak for Jen. She would be the expert on that, so she would have the actual rates.
Yeah.
Just that rates have gone up so much that as old debt comes off,
Yeah.
you replace it, the expense is going to be, should be a lot higher because rates are higher.
And then finally, we have our debt service interest as the final piece of it.
Okay.
One thing I have on my file that Scott's file does not have is transfer to the transfer station
Oh, yeah.
enterprise fund. They requested $31,920. It's on my file.
So where would that be? Yeah, that we talked about in terms of, we have the monitoring of the capping of the old landfill, the old, whatever, that has to, it has to be done, and we've talked about it as one way to help out on the, sort of the red ink on the transfer station right now would be to take on that as part of the town budget rather than putting it into the transfer station or highway budget. So somewhere around 30,000, and where is that, Bradley? And you've already built it in this, or?
Not on Scott's file, but it would be under transfer stabilization, so above the debt service.
Okay. So that's something we need to think about, whether we can do that.
Why would we want to accept that without some commitment from the transfer station to come up with a plan to break even over the next number of years?
Well,
Right.
I mean, we might, but I mean, that's part of what we talked about was, how can we, there's no way that they're going to be able, no matter how much they increase bag fees, that with the lesser revenue on recycling, they're not going to be able to break even anytime soon this year by the looks. And this 30 or 35,000, whatever it is, on an annual fee basis is really, whether that landfill or the transfer station was there or not, the town has to pay this monitoring fee year after year after year.
I know, I was the one who brought that up.
So why not make it a town responsibility and
Because
not dump it on one department to
The
manage?
whole transfer station needs to be addressed, and I wouldn't piecemeal that part of it, which is a part of it that needs to be solved. But I wouldn't break that off and just solve that one part, because it doesn't get to the root of the problem, which is really the transfer station is not a profitable enterprise.
Okay.
I know that Randall did have the DEP out. He's trying to amend the permit to allow other municipalities to bring their trash into it.
Yeah, I think he's working on different solutions to do that.
Right, and I think the way to go about working on different solutions, and we can talk about working on this over a number of years, I brought up the concept of having a committee that would address this. I would like to see a plan put in place to have this solved.
Mm-hmm.
So one.
Is that something the efficiencies committee can work on? Is that
Cost efficiencies could take up this as one idea. Yeah, absolutely.
One thing on taking out the monitoring fees, I talked to Jerry really quickly, and she did a little bit of research. So back in 1991, it was actually supposed to be a landfill enterprise fund that was established to pay for the monitoring costs, which to me doesn't make sense because the landfill isn't generating any money by itself.
Yeah.
So the only generation was the transfer station. So one of the things that she cautioned is taking that out. We just might have to talk to DEP just to make sure that we're 100% okay. I think it's actually fixing the way it was supposed to be intended back in 1991, rather than taking that.
In 1991, was landfill accepting trash at that point?
I don't know.
Because at that point, it wouldn't have been capped.
Yeah.
That's something we need to determine.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was closed at that point.
Yeah, whatever we do, we'd have to be sure we're in regs with
Yeah.
DEP for sure. Yeah. Okay. All right, so where do we go from here? I mean, we've got a couple, obviously, we've got some unknowns that we've got in terms of the highway department, some union negotiations, some other salary negotiations to work on.
I mean, this is all without touching, like, there's money in the ambulance,
Ambulance receipts money?
yep, and, the stabilization fund, things like that, but it all depends what the select board wants to go forward with.
Yeah. So I think we're obviously going to have another
It was capped
set
in
of iterations in
1997.
terms of the balancing the budget here too. But any thoughts and comments or advice from the Finance Committee in terms of where we would like to, where we should be looking? I mean, I know there are certain funds that we don't usually want to touch. We don't want to use free cash to balance our budget and all those good things. So, any thoughts from you guys as to how you would recommend we try to close the gap a little bit? Dan's had an idea, but so this right now is not allowing for any real issues with the Collins report coming in. So that's another unknown impact. If we've got wages in that are just, people have just put in their one-step increase, and that's all they've done, which is what I think their instructions were told. The instructions were to take where people are on the current wage scale and move it one step, which is equivalent to about a 3%, 2.5% to 3%. But we don't know how far off we are when we get the Collins report to see if we're really way low, or some might be right on target. So that doesn't right now, the 229 or whatever that you're showing as a gap does not take any of that discussion into play, correct?
So some departments did do the increase as Ed had asked them to, some did not.
Okay.
So it's not very reflective, like just picking on the building department really quickly. So he level funded his salary. So that number actually doesn't take into account any Collins interchanges. I mean, one suggestion that we might want to do is, once we get the report, depending if we do have available funds, we might want to think about level funding salaries, but then taking a pool of money and allocating a COLA for everybody, and then the people that are furthest away from where they need to be, we might want to add a few percentage points every year. So it might be a 3 to 5 year plan.
Might be a process. It may not all happen in one fell swoop. Yeah, no. And I think we tried to make a stab at that about 2 or 3 years ago, where we tried to do some adjustment to the lower paid employees in particular, but really just basing it on not anything in terms of real market rates. So that's where I'm hoping that we'll get some real figures to look at very soon that can help us figure this out, because we may have a bigger gap here, or figure out how we can then take it one step at a time to make those adjustments. But any thoughts you've got over there, please, Guy, go ahead.
Just a general question. Is it appropriate to charge Scott with making a recommendation that balances the budget and have him present that to us? And that's kind of what Dan's talking about, I think. But is that within his role, can he be charged?
Let me explain what I'm asking for. I'm asking him to categorize the line items here. Are they fixed salaries, which if we put some heuristics around, some rules on how we would go about balancing this budget, then it's very easy to, we can start segregating down to what areas, which line items we would target to adjust.
I think
so. That's what I'm asking.
That part of what the green lines are is the fixed, pretty much the fixed cost.
Yeah, that's pretty much level funding everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's about $100,000 difference between last year and this year.
Well, okay, so back to the pie chart you had. You mentioned that the red portion are the other costs that we may change if we avoid touching wages and our debt and things that we really can't. So my question is really, is it possible in that spreadsheet to highlight the red items? That's what I wanted to see.
Yeah, I can go through that a little bit more.
So I'm not asking him to identify, to make the cuts. I'm asking him to help us parse the data so we're not spending, I would say, wasting our time in this meeting trying to figure out which lines we need to attack, right?
So you want to see all the wages, all the expenses, maintenance?
Yeah, let's just filter it down to what we can actually adjust.
Yeah, what do we have the ability to actually adjust, and what can't we touch at all because of, certain set costs are contractual. But-
Right. Things like postage is a lot easier to touch than contracts. You know what I mean?
$10, I don't know how much
Postage may not help us balance the
Oh,
budget.
yeah,
very much.
17.5, yeah.
Yeah, Stephen, go ahead.
So expanding on Scott's observation, he's already flagged a couple of dozen lines where he thinks that there is flexibility. Having had a conversation with the department head, having received their request, he's identified things small and large where there's not a contractual limitation. There's not a well-understood escalation in the cost of insurance. Having done that analysis, you could sort those yellow items by absolute magnitude, not percent deviation, because some of those with a large percent deviation were just pocket change.
Correct, yeah.
Some of those with a small deviation add up very quickly. So, thank you, Scott. I think the suggestion for Scott to further sort this and say, here's the scenario. Here are the things that make me particularly uncomfortable about the scenario to close the gap. So I'm in support of that.
Yeah. So I'm going to.
May I ask a question?
Scott and Bradley, please include Bradley.
Well, of course. Scott just got here. He wouldn't have any numbers if it wasn't for Bradley.
Exactly.
No, Bradley's my main man. I wanted to ask about the wages for the regional school system. They're in mediation. I understand that means the timeline is indefinite. Does the budget approval process for the regional school system hold harmless the communities until fiscal 26? Or might they come to us having mediated out an agreement and say, please write another check? I don't know that process.
Yeah, not totally clear. I don't know if anybody else has any
That was
insight into
the
that.
question I asked. Is this the maximum
Well, that's what they
budget?
said, is that right now, it's not.
It's the
like
maximum.
That's what John said too, it's not supposed to go up, they voted on it. So
Yeah.
it shouldn't go up, is what they've told us tonight. But that's,
But it does not reflect any range of negotiation. It's
no, I mean, it's their
straight.
mediation, so you don't know where that's going to end. Donna, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say that I would think if negotiations don't go as they budgeted for and it's higher, then they would have no choice but to come back.
I didn't know if implementation would have to be delayed until a new fiscal year when each of the towns got on board. I just don't know.
Yeah, because I was asking the very specific question of what things are uncertain, and if the salaries for employees are uncertain at this point, I would include that in saying it's something that wouldn't increase, because I want to understand what is the variability, what's the range, which things could increase, and which items could increase, so we know what we're dealing with here. If it seems like there's a lot of uncertainty, if there's uncertainty in the budget, what is the range?
So, but these are the figures we have to go on right now, so we'll have to work with this and see where they end up. But I think, this at least gives us a place to go forward. So I think with, and I think too with the budget narratives, I guess, which we haven't had a chance to really look at in great detail. But should there be, I know you said there weren't too many that had put in something on the wish list column, but to the extent in the budget narratives, they have said, hey, this is something that, we understand it may be a challenge, but this is what we would really like to see, and here's why. I mean, to the extent we can accommodate a few of the things on the wish list, that would be great. I don't know if we can do that or not, but at least look at that as you're also going through some of this in case there's something that stands out as a real need, a stronger wish than just a, hey, I want this, but it's, we need this really. And if we had this, it would make X amount of difference in whatever we're doing. That would be helpful if we knew that. But.
I think next year, I would probably suggest doing an actual level funded budget, one that is a budget that maintains services.
Yeah.
And then one that has additional things to improve efficiencies, like whether it's a staff member or software or whatever it is. So it might be something we want to look at next year.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
I was going to suggest a methodology to get us through the rest of this year in terms of what you're talking about, of things that may increase, the nice to haves, the things they may not have included in their budget, but we could add. So along with that list of areas where we may reduce, which you can help us parse that list down to that area. Also making that list of areas that we may want to, that may increase. Right? If we just look at, if we had those two lists, the things that can go up and the things that can go down, I believe we can arrive at a number.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions for tonight? I don't know that we can go much further on this. This is what we have, but at least thank you for putting all these figures together and giving us the overview and see where we can take it from here. But Stephen?
I wanted to add my thanks. This is a substantial refinement over the last thing we saw, and it's bringing it all together.
Yeah.
So we got department by department views. We had general malaise about how big the total number was going to be. But this is something we can wrestle to conclusion. Thank you. It's a lot of detail work and triple checking the numbers.
Yeah.
Well, that's Bradley.
Yeah, there's nothing to be lost in saying thanks there. And I would also add that I see us, we're very close. We're within 1%. We don't have a long way to go here.
Okay, so I think, Bradley, any thoughts from you in terms of what you would like to focus on, or is this sounding more doable? Are you feeling relatively comfortable with this, or?
I'm going to review all narratives and see. Some people will say rates are going up, or like their application is going up, so I'm going to be able to cut those.
Right.
I'll see, like, oh, they want a new copier, new something.
Sure, yeah.
We'll look into saying, like, can you hold off a year or something?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. No, that's good. I think it's really important we ask people to put in a fairly good narrative this year. I don't want to discount those. So, we've seen, I think, a lot of them as they came in, but you've probably got the bigger package with everybody's requests. So that's really helpful to understand how people got to some of their thinking here. Okay. All right, then if there's nothing else, I think we'll probably call it for tonight. We have our regular select board meeting on the 9th, next Tuesday, and so we will probably see if there's some updates at that point in time. We'll take a look at those and see where we go from here. But thanks for everybody.
Great.
So with that.
Adjourn?
Second. Yeah, so let's have finance. Would you like to motion to adjourn first? We'll let you do that.
Motion to adjourn at 7:50. All in favor?
Aye. All right, good. And select board, motion to, second. Yep. Stephen, aye. Okay, all in favor, aye. All right, perfect. We are right on the heels of Finance Committee. We're also adjourned at about 7:50.
Yeah, so if they establish that